Let's talk about the Liberty Dialogues and its order, and specifically the matter of authority. Let's dive deeper into authority. Now, before jurisdiction, status, standing, obligation, or enforcement, before they can be considered, there must be a valid source of authority. The purpose is to distinguish between actual delegated authority and mere assertion, presumption, policy, custom, or force for that matter. For government officials and agencies and those that represent them, good questions are designed to force them to identify the precise scope, source, and limits of their claimed authority. Would you agree? So let's consider why the American people are so inculcated or enamored, or perhaps another word is better, but why are we so compliant and subservient to the prevailing presumption? Why do we not question it more and challenge authority in general? Is a basic fundamental question to ask anybody who is exercising authority this: what is the exact source of your authority in this matter? A follow-up question to that would be: is your claimed authority derived from the Constitution, a statute, a regulation, contract, or something else? Comment on this. Now, the problem, though, and this is where the rubber meets the road, is that most officials are not accustomed to getting questions like this. So when they hear the question, they may flap their gums and hem and haw and spout some answer that's unresponsive, but simply by force continue to presume. And what is the average American supposed to do with that? What about this third question to ask any government official, and that is: what specific constitutional provision authorizes this action? Comment. An additional question would be: what specific statute gives this authority? And if the actual agent knew of the statute or the ordinance or the regulation, then perhaps that might satisfy it. Would the American then say, let me see that source of authority? Would that be proper? Okay, so somebody could actually cite a statute or ordinance, and then the American could simply respond by saying, is this merely an interpretation or policy? Comment on that. I appreciate that. And thank you for your politeness and kindness as you heard that yapping dog go behind us as we were talking. You're very polite. Now, here is another question that relates to the statute, and that is what regulation implements the statute? Speak about this by expanding upon the concept of regulations implementing. So, if somebody actually receives a statute, an ordinance, or perhaps a regulation, and it is not merely an interpretation, what would one do at that moment to escalate it as far as a challenge respectfully, or to maybe consider complying? But you would also agree, though, that once authority was established, even though it may not particularly apply in that given situation or to a given person, one would still say, well, if that is the authority, then let's move to jurisdiction status, standing, and obligation. Respond to that. Another question would be from an American to an official, or anywhere in the globe for that matter. I just don't want to limit this to America. But does the regulation itself exceed the authority delegated by the statute? Comment, please. So, if somebody actually has gone this far and asked key questions, the next one might be something like, who delegated this authority to you? And in that case, somebody would be challenging that official personally and professionally as being the proper authority person to apply that power. Comment on that. Somebody could then ask, what is the chain of delegation from the people to your office? Most people who are refined in this kind of study, I should say, understand that there are certain cases, whether it's appellate level or Supreme Court level, or even at the state level, where it has been ascertained that the citizen is required to ensure that the authority figure stays within the limits of his or her power. Respond to that, please. Okay, so let's say that somebody actually approaches a governing official and challenges their authority. Most of the times, perhaps the authority figure is not as schooled or informed and may be more egocentric and power driven and may take offense to such a question. How would you handle that then? Very good. And then what prevents your claimed authority from extending beyond its proper scope? That's a very powerful question. Now, we move on then to authority in general. If somebody were to ask an official, is your authority general or does it apply to a specific class of persons, places, or activities? We're getting more of a definitive understanding of authority's use, are we not? That's when somebody could ask, does your authority apply to me specifically? And if so, why? How do you determine whether fall within the class of persons subject to your authority is the next question. Comment. Another question could be, what evidence do you have that I consented to or entered the relationship that creates your authority over me? Comment, please. Consider this question then. What evidence do you have that I consented to or enter the relationship that creates your authority over me? Or did I just ask you that one? So if the answer is unclear, then somebody could simply say, "Are you relying upon a presumption, or do you have actual proof?" That's a rather direct way of approaching it. Talk to me about whether authority is mandatory or discretionary. I've got a number of questions that are still remaining, I should say, and I want to pause for a second because it's hard to conceive in my mind, based upon my personal experience, any average authority figure taking the time to respond to some 15 to 20 different questions. That's something that they normally do not expect, and they probably, because of their lack of education, experience, or knowledge of these matters, might take an affront to such questioning. Comment on that. So somebody could actually get a little bit more specific with any official and say, can you cite the exact language that authorizes this demand or action? Please comment. Then there's the question, does your office have authority over private conduct or only over regulated activity? Please respond. So, what about this distinction? And it's a question, but I'd like you to respond. And that is, what is the difference between your authority and your power? Why would somebody ask that question? Should we accept that distinction as concrete forevermore? And that is, authority is lawful, whereby power is simply the exercise of force, so to speak? Okay. And then the next question that is very much in play is, are you acting under lawful authority or merely under color of law? And please make the distinction. Okay, very good. Now, does your authority come from legislation or only from internal policy or procedure? And I would add probably absent regulation. Please comment. Very good. Now, if the legislature did not expressly authorize this, where do you claim the authority comes from? Respond. Very good. Now, I like this next question, and I think it's powerful, especially if somebody can actually get this far and query the official. And that is, what remedy exists if you exceed your authority? So, if somebody who's an official waffles at this point and does not cite a remedy, would it be appropriate for somebody to respectfully ask for their badge number and any credentials that validate who they are and their supposed authority in order to proceed? So they would understand also that somebody would say who reviews or restrains your authority, perhaps somebody who is in the chain of command that I may talk to if I'm not satisfied. Comment, please. Another question could be, are you personally liable if you act outside of your lawful authority? Comment, please. All right, hold on one second. I got some noise in the background. Thank you. All right, let's try and continue with the background noise as it is. Now, does the public have the right to inspect the source of your authority? Respond to that question. Would it also be reasonable for someone to ask if there are court cases that define or limit that person's authority? Now, we get back to fundamentals again with this question, and that is, what facts must exist before your authority can lawfully be exercised? That's a powerful question. So if the facts do not exist, then that person would probably agree that their authority does not exist as well. One second. Okay. ChatGPT, I appreciate your time. I'm going to do a second session that talks about the authority of the people so that we have a complement to the presumed authority or actual authority of governing or public officials. And so I will invite you back for that session. In the meantime, what would you tell people in general about the value of the Liberty Dialogues with respect to understanding? One second. All right, very good. ChatGPT, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to speaking with you again.